Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Vasudha Sridharan, and on behalf of Cumulus Networks, I'd like to welcome you all to Manage Your Switches Like Servers webinar. Presenting today will be Carl and Leslie Carr. Carl joined Puppet Labs in June of 2011 as a professional services engineer after being a longtime Puppet community member. He is interested in continuous delivery of IT delivery and IT cultures that promote C. He is now on the product team focused on product marketing. Leslie Carr is currently a DevOps engineer at Cumulus Networks. She was previously on the production side of the world at many large websites such as Google and Twitter. She is a lover and user of open source and automation. This webinar will be about 30 to 45 minutes. We will answer a few questions from the participants at the end if time permits. For those of you interested, you have the opportunity to ask questions during the webinar by using the window marked questions. Simply type in your question and click send. You can also tweet your questions to us. Our Twitter handle is @CumulusNetworks. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to Carl.
Great, thank you very much. So I am Carl Comm. I am a recovering sysadmin. I've used Puppet for a long time. It started back in the 0.22 days. So one of the things that really interested me when I first started kind of getting into this idea of Puppet and things is how it can help shift not only the way we do our work, but the way we work together as a team. And so ever since then, I've been really interested in IT cultures and how we can use tools that are available to us to change the way we think of each other within an organization to help drive the way we actually get work done. And a lot of that is driven by two conflicting things that you'll see in the market. And to kind of talk a little bit about this, I started off, as Vasudha mentioned, as a professional service engineer at Puppet, but I've also done software engineering, UX prototype design, product management, and now product marketing. And I only mention that because I've seen a lot of the different parts of the machine, if you will, of all the different development parts that go on to getting a product from idea to customer. And there's two different things that we always see as conflicting. The need to move fast, things like time to market matter. Getting a high cadence, a release cadence matters. But at the same time, so does reliability, right? If you launched up the Uber app and no cars were available to be hailed, that would be a problem, right? So not only do you have to move fast, you have to be available. This is, definitely when we look at the DevOps report that we do every year at Puppet Labs, this is definitely shown in the data. 60% of managers are not satisfied with the speed that IT is deploying. They're not moving fast enough. But at the same time, 70% of IT outages are due to unexpected configuration changes. So we have this world where we need to move really, really fast, and everybody's saying we can't move fast enough, where we need to even go faster than we are today. But at the same time, 70% of the work that we're doing that causes failures is due to us moving too fast and not keeping track of everything that's going on. So Luke Knies is our founder at Puppet Labs, and he started Puppet to kind of help answer some of these. He was looking at a lot of tools on the market, these ideas around configuration management and infrastructure as code, such as CF Engine, those kinds of tools. And he wasn't really happy with where they were going, and so he developed Puppet as an answer to that. So how Puppet works is it's a declarative model. So what you do is you write code that describes the state you want your systems to be in. And when Puppet runs, it compares the actual state of the system to what you said the state should be, and if there's any differences at all, it fixes it. Now this has a pretty profound impacts on how you think about your infrastructure. No longer are you thinking about the differences between RHEL and Debian, because all you have to do is say things like, I want this package installed. I don't care how you do it, just do it. So now you don't even have to think about the difference between the operating systems on the Yum apps, those kinds of levels. But also you don't have to think about the steps. That's the important piece of Puppet, is that you have a declarative model where you describe your desired end state, and you don't have to worry about the steps to get there. Puppet figures that out. So you'll start off by defining that end state. You'll be able to simulate it and then go into enforcement mode, so where that state is actually brought into convergence, and then Puppet, of course, will tell you about that. And where you start off is that definition process. Now, this is what I was talking about, where you write code that defines the end state of your system. One of the great things about that, though, is when you run it, it doesn't matter where the state of the system is currently. So in other words, if you have a bare bones operating system, you can run Puppet and it'll bring it into full deployment configuration in one single step. But more importantly, it'll keep it that way over time. Puppet checks in every 30 minutes saying, is it right? Is it right? Is it right? And if it's ever not right, it fixes it. That means that your day 1 operations and your day 2 and even day 3 to day 100 operations are all the exact same process to Puppet. There is no difference between them. That means one code base, one tool, one level of insight into every single step that you do to deploy out services to your infrastructure. So once you define the state using code, I'm sorry, I'll only back up a little bit. You define the state using code, but you can also download modules that you'll see right over here on the right side here. If we have a Puppet Forge, one of the great things about Puppet is the fact that since you use code to describe that state, that means it's reusable. Code is reusable. If you go to github.com, right, you can download all of this great code. But you can also do that from the Puppet Forge for Puppet, what we call Puppet modules, which are reusable bits of code that you can download to take care of common tasks within your infrastructure. And these are things like NTP, Apache, MySQL, SSH, things like that. What we find is that people can use the Puppet modules to manage, on average, 80% of their infrastructure out of the box. The 20% of your infrastructure that's unique, that's the part where you write your own custom modules on top of the base modules that you download from the Forge to get that unique bit that makes your infrastructure special. So one of the great things about being able to compare the actual state of the system to what you said the state should be means that we can simulate a change. We can tell you what we would do. And it just simply says, hey, you said that this package should be installed. It's not. If you tell me to go in enforcement mode, I will install this package. Or it may come back and say, hey, you know what? That package is already installed. You said it should be. We're good. Don't have to do anything. Once you go into enforcement mode, that's when it'll actually start to bring in the systems under convergence. Right? It'll see all the differences that the infrastructure is in compared to how you said the state should be, and then bring those into convergence and manage drift remediation. And of course, we tell you what we do. Right? So once we install a system or install a package or don't install a package, we create a firewall rule, destroy a firewall rule, leave it as is. We'll tell you about all the changes that are going on across all of your infrastructure. So how does this apply to networking? This is really great for compute, and I would say that as far as servers go, configuration management is mostly a solved problem. Networking is one of the great final frontiers in the data center still currently. A lot of times when we first started looking into, if you look at networking in the past, it's definitely been kind of a black box system. Well, now with tools like Cumulus combined with Puppet Enterprise, we can kind of remove those black boxes, and we can remove the magic that's going on behind the scenes and bring those into the same tooling that we use on our compute side. Now, that means that before all of this, you had siloed teams, right? You had networking teams that would take tickets to make changes. You never really knew how they were making those changes, but they weren't working very closely with the server team. Again, you had siloed tooling. You had a tool to manage your network. You had a tool to manage your compute. Those processes were not combined. It was not easy and coordinated to deploy out a change that spanned compute as well as network. That slowed things down. Right? You have slow collaboration and slow information sharing. That's not great when your IT team needs to move faster and faster. And those differences between processing, there were differences between provisioning and ongoing change management. A lot of times you would find teams that would have entirely different set of ZTP scripts, for example, that set up the base, the initial configuration of a switch, but then they would do manual configuration for any kind of changes that they needed to make. Well, that's kind of a problem, right? You need to be able to unify all of those different processes. So one of the great things that we can do with these new DevOps cultures and then tools that help enforce those DevOps cultures is to enhance collaboration. We can bring in unified change, insight, and then management for all of the infrastructure, not just your compute, not just your virtual infrastructure, your cloud infrastructures, but also pull in networking and storage devices and treat your infrastructure as one single tool that all interrelates. And of course, that enhanced collaboration between network operations and systems operations is really important to be able to do that. So how does Puppet fit in? Well, excuse me. If you can use Puppet to run on your network, as we do with Cumulus, you can now share infrastructure as code between all of IT. That means your network team who specializes in network configurations can share their code with the rest of IT with sysops, and now sysops can contribute to that code. They can come in and say, hey, you know what, we need to make a change to the network. Here are some proposed changes that we'd like to make, and those proposals are done through a pull request, for example. And now the network team can work with them and say, hey, you know what, this is really great, thanks, we're going to pull it in and enforce it. Or they can say, you know what, this is close, but we're going to make some small tweaks here. This opposite is true. The network team can now collaborate around infrastructure as code on the compute side as well. So that means that using all of that, you can eliminate the differences between the initial configuration and the ongoing change management. Again, to Puppet, it's all the same thing. You're either in your desired state or you're not. It doesn't matter if you're doing an initial provisioning or if you're doing a day 100 change to an interface. Once you have all of that, now application deployments that span compute and network become far, far, far easier. So yeah, like I was saying, all of those different day 1, day 2, day 3 operations such as application deployments, configuration of port channels, all of these things can now be managed within Puppet and pulled into a single tool. And you can treat all of the different networking components to all of the different application components, all of the different interdependencies, and understand those dependencies and use Puppet to be able to deploy them in a coordinated fashion. And then be able to see everything that's going on within the Puppet Enterprise console. So that's all I have for about Puppet and networking. I'm going to turn it over to Leslie Carr, who is going to talk to you about the specifics of it.
Oh, thank you so much, Carl. So before I get started, I just wanted to give everyone a little, who am I? Why should you be listening to me? I've been an operations engineer about the past 15 years, working at some major websites you may have heard of, like Google, Craigslist, and Wikipedia. I also would like to give a little plug. I will be speaking at PuppetConf on Friday, October 9th up in Portland on why Net DevOps. So what is Cumulus Linux? It's a Debian-based distribution for network switches because we believe very strongly that you should be able to manage your network switches just like you manage your servers. And you can use the whole plethora of existing Linux tools, such as Puppet Enterprise, that already you already know and love for your servers. Our current release is based on Debian Wheezy. So, in the classic networking world, your switch operating system and physical hardware are all sold in one blob, right? Like you buy Cisco with iOS, for example. Vendors usually like this because you get really great margins, but you also can be very constricted. We are pushing the open networking model so that you can choose your hardware and your software from different vendors. And another big plus in this is that you can run all sorts of software on top of your switch, just like you would on a server, right? So, for example, Ganglia, Puppet Enterprise, and things like that. Also, as we all know in the server world, when you buy a Dell server, you aren't buying it with a Dell version of Linux. So we think this is a much better, modern way of going about things. If you go to our website, you can see our hardware compatibility list. We currently, I believe, support hardware from 7 different hardware vendors. So now for the fun stuff. For installation and configuration of traditional network gear, it's been really painful. You get your switch. It comes installed with really old software. So you usually have to telnet or use a serial console to get into the box. You TFTP a new image, and then you enable SSH, and sometimes you have to use passwords. You can't even use keys. You copy and paste your configuration, and I'm sure many of you have experience doing this over a serial console. All of a sudden you run out the serial buffer, and you're like, what's going on? Why is my configuration not working? And the automation has been really painful. There's some Perl programs, and you have to use a lot of screen scraping and expect scripts. But server installation, on the other hand, is beautiful. You plug your machine in, you reboot it, Pixie catches, sends over a boot image, some pre and post installation scripts run, and then you can have Puppet Enterprise manage all of your configuration and administration. So we are trying to solve this here at Cumulus Networks. We've developed Oni, which is sort of like a BIOS and Pixie and Kickstarter all in one. It's implemented with BusyBox, and we have donated this code to the Open Compute project. Oni runs directly on the switch so that as soon as you reboot your switch, instead of loading into BIOS and Pixie like it would with a normal server, you load into Oni, which is the network bootloader. And then Oni can load Cumulus Linux or several other networking operating systems. So when you boot up your server with Oni, first it will look for the installer. Usually if you have either a USB key plugged in, or it will look over the network on its management interface. It will use DHCP, IPv6 neighbor, so for all of you who have IPv6 in your network already right now, or else it will attempt to TFTP to a manually reconfigured IP address. And then it will search for a file name named oni-installer-star, and will attempt to download that. You can see more great documentation on Oni at oni.org for some more configuration hints. And the best part, after Cumulus Linux has installed and loaded, then zero-touch provisioning can start. During the DHCP process on each zero, Cumulus Linux will request option 239, will request an option which will tell you where a custom provisioning script is. It will also send headers if you want to build a more advanced system to make even more custom provisioning scripts. The ZTP scripts can be written in Bash, Perl, Python, or Ruby. So everyone uses one of those languages. And the important thing is it must somewhere in the comments contain the text Cumulus-auto provisioning. So I have a nice little example script here. I'll just run through it with everyone. So you can see this is just using Bash. This is a ZTP script actually we use on a lot of our internal switches. So lines 3 through 7 are just trapping errors. So we want to see if any errors occur on zero-touch provisioning where they've occurred. We add in a repository, and then lines 11 through 19 are just the normal installation process of Puppet. So as you can see, just like you would on any normal Debian server, we just use apt. All we have to do is apt get update. We also are upgrading on this switch because I always love when my switches, as soon as I plug them in, when you get started, they come with a nice shiny new versions of all the packages. We install Puppet. Just want to make sure that Puppet will automatically start on boot. And then as soon as we restart Puppet, Puppet will attempt to pull. So nice and easy and great. And then as you can see on line 21, there's a Cumulus auto provisioning flag. And then line 23, exit with error code 0, tells ZTP that your script has correctly run. So now I just told you all of this, but I would like to show you instead. I have a little video to show you this because for two reasons. Number one, we all know live demos often can go wrong. And number two, the switch booting process can be a little slow. So I just sped this up for everyone's viewing pleasure. So as we can see here, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. That's the next video. Let me grab the correct video of the booting process. There we go. All right. As you can see, this is rebooting now. This will look pretty familiar. This looks sort of like BIOS on any server, but it's actually Oni. And as you can see, it's loading up Oni and it's attempting DHCP. So DHCP, gave an answer back, and now it's Oni service discovery will be searching for the Oni installer. As you can see, it has now caught the installer, So first, it does a quick verification, because you obviously don't want a corrupted image to try to install on your server. And then it double checks that the platform is actually supported by this Oni version, which it is. And it starts formatting and partitioning the hard drive. One thing I find interesting about switches is they often will we have 2 slots versus servers tend to only have 1 slot. Switches tend to be a little more specialized of hardware, and and so you always are a little more cautious. So sometimes when you're upgrading to a new version of the software, you may want to install it on another slot in case something goes wrong. You can really quickly reboot the switch and roll back to slot 1. It's just, it's a pretty common thing in switches and routers. So as you can see, the Oni is installing on both slots, and now we are rebooting. And as soon as Cumulus Linux loads, we will then see the ZTP script you just saw. Here's your normal, booting, file system check, all that fun stuff, which if you've watched a Linux box boot, you've seen that a lot. And now you can see the ZTP script. First, we're doing an apt-get update to make sure that apps knows about the latest version of all packages. Then we're doing an upgrade to make sure that all the packages are completely up to date. And now we're doing an apt-get install Puppet. And with the awesomeness of apt, Puppet and all of its dependencies are installed. So it's very easy to install Puppet. And there we go. Puppet is now installed and ready for us to run. So because Cumulus Linux is Debian-based, we can do everything with Puppet Enterprise. We can create users, do interface configuration, and routing software configuration. Cumulus Linux, we usually recommend people use Quagga, which is an excellent open source routing program. But since we're Linux-based, you can use any routing software you would like. So here, we can now see a Puppet run on the switch. Just wanted to show you, nothing underneath my sleeves. There's no routes, no neighbors, and until Puppet runs and installs everything. So this is a very first Puppet run on a brand new switch. As many of you are familiar with that, first we have to sync over all of the functions. So Factor can give us all of our awesome facts. And we change the message of the day, install the Cumulus Linux license, and we will also be configuring all of the interfaces and Quagga as well. So the license is just installed. Make sure that the networking service is running. Create 2 new users. In their home directories. Configure Quagga to run with OSPF. Update our NTP servers because everyone loves NTP and keeping our time all synced up. And as you can see, now we have a bunch of routes and we have OSPF neighbors, and PTM shows all of our uplinks. So now you've just configured your switch just as quickly as you can configure any of your servers, and with really 0 effort. So I find that pretty cool, right? Awesome. Now instead of taking an hour to configure your switch, you run Puppet and you're all done. But how can we make your life even better? Well, I'm sure many of you have been to start building a new data center and none of your internet connectivity has come in yet, right? But you've already flown out there. You want to get things started rolling. Well, since Cumulus Linux is Linux, we can also run it as a Puppet server. Now this is a warning. switches, since they are very specialized pieces of hardware, do have small hard drives and limited processing power. So I wouldn't recommend you use your switch as a puppet master for the long term, but it's an excellent way to start bootstrapping all of your gear. So I wanted to show you here the little topology you're going to see. On the left side of the screen, you will see the switch named Leaf 1. On the right side, Leaf 2. And Leaf 1 is going to be our puppet master. Now on this video, on the left side, I'm showing the Apache log on Leaf 1 so that you can see all the requests. I find it to be one of the more interesting logs to tail while I'm running Puppet, especially as a puppet master. And as you can see on the right, everything is working very smoothly. Once again, install some new users, install the licensing, and configure your routing protocol and interfaces. So, yay! Now we're all done. So if you want to learn more, we have some Puppet modules on the Forge that can make your life easier if you want to go beyond just your normal templating. We also have a demo on the Cumulus workbench, so you can see example code for using Puppet and do a little walkthrough of how you can use Puppet Enterprise on Cumulus switches. All of the code that I have used here is available on GitHub. We also have our specialized open source hub at oss.cumulusnetworks.com. And if you want to try out Cumulus for yourself, we have Cumulus VX. It's a virtual appliance available. You can use VirtualBox, KVM, Vagrant, or VMware to download and try out Cumulus VX. We have a Cumulus Workbench where you can try out playing with physical switches, and you could read more about Cumulus Linux at cumulusnetworks.com. And once again, I will be speaking at PuppetConf at 1:30 p.m. Friday, October 9th in Portland. I would love to see all of you there. And this will be a great way to find out how you can start automating your network if you aren't doing it yet. So now I would love any questions you have.
Thank you, Leslie and Carl. So we've been getting a bunch of questions, and we'll try to. One of the questions is, does Cumulus supply an equivalent SNMP agent as compared to the proprietary vendors? Why would I set up my network with Puppet Enterprise?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll take that one. So earlier I was talking about the culture shift that you can have when you are able to share and collaborate on infrastructure as code. So there's a couple of benefits that you can get from that. One, Puppet Enterprise, of course, automates your initial configuration, and it keeps it that way over time, just as Leslie was showing you. But it also allows you to be able to move faster and be able to scale out. So when you configure something with one switch, you can now run that across 1,000 identical switches. Even have little tiny variations between each one, but have the exact same model and standardize your configuration and enforce that standard across all of your switches, as well as being able to have their coordinated application deployment and basically that DevOps proliferation culture, the culture proliferation between all of your IT teams.
Okay. Is it open source? Can you use it for free?
That's a great question. Cumulus is majority open source. All of our Linux kernel module, Linux kernel updates are not only open, they also have been all contributed back to mainline. We use open source software extensively. We have one piece that is closed source due to Broadcom SDK licensing. It's called switchd. So when you're using Cumulus Linux, you are using the Linux networking routing table, right? But routing in software can be very slow. So we use the Broadcom chipset to do all of our routing and switching in hardware. And switchd is the process that syncs all of the routing and switching tables between the software Linux table and the hardware Broadcom table. Due to the licensing of the Broadcom SDK, that cannot be open source. But the vast majority of our software is. You can go to oss.cumuluslinux.com to see all of our patches. You also can check out on GitHub all of the software that we've developed, and our fork of Quagga, the vast majority of which has been merged back into mainline Quagga. And you can also try out Cumulus VX as a virtual image if you want to play around with a free image and see what all we can do.
Okay, great. What are the common customer traditionalist security concerns, and how are they addressed?
I often get this question, which I find interesting, because in my opinion, the server world has actually been much better about security than the networking world, and I feel that Cumulus is trying to go towards the more server model. For example, with the Heartbleed vulnerabilities, many traditional switches are based on a Linux distribution and were then vulnerable themselves. And instead of being able to immediately take the released patches, you have to wait for them to go through their very long flow model of releasing a new binary image. So you weren't able to take control of that. As soon as the new OpenSSL patches were out, we were able to immediately push those in so that all of our customers could just do an apt-get upgrade and benefit from all of that. As well, I believe that you should secure your switches just like you would any server. Make sure that you don't have any easy passwords on them. I like to use IP tables to restrict who can get access to the management side of the world. And yeah, so I feel that the server world already has done an excellent job with security for the most part, and we should take all of that knowledge and best practices and apply it back to the switch world.
You know, and to kind of extend on that great answer, one of the great things about having infrastructure as code is having something that's testable. Code is code, right? We can test that. And tools like Gauntlet and RSpec and all of it, being able to take a code change and run it through a gamut of pen testing automatically means that you can prove that code at least meets all of the security policies and standards that you already have in place.
Okay. In Cumulus VX, does it support proprietary switches? This is a question that is moved towards Cumulus VX.
Cumulus VX does not support switchd because switchd is the daemon that runs to push everything, all of the routes to hardware. And since Cumulus VX has no hardware, switchd doesn't run on it. So switchd is a hardware-only piece.
Okay. And what should I configure with Oni scripts versus Puppet?
Well, I like to just configure to do as little as possible in Oni and ZTP to allow Puppet to do everything, because then you can use Puppet as your single source of truth. So I like to do the bare minimum, just upgrade, install Puppet, and then maybe update Puppet's configuration file to reach the correct Puppet master, so that we can use all of the great tools and great modules that Puppet has developed and the Puppet community has developed to keep all of our switches up to date and maintained.
On the Puppet side, we refer to that as the GEOS method, the just enough operating system. We find that that applies just as well to compute as it does to networking. So just to second Leslie's answer.
Okay. And one other question is, apt-get Puppet installs latest version of Puppet. Few months down the line, it may not be up to date. How to maintain an up-to-date version of Puppet on switches?
That's another good question. So we our our apt repository does not currently have Puppet 4. We're still running with Puppet 3. However, Puppet Labs maintains their own apt repositories. And so you can just add to your apt configuration Puppet Labs apt repositories if you'd like, and then you can always get the latest and greatest version. apt-get upgrade will also make sure that you are getting the latest version, that you keep your switches on the latest version of the package.
Okay. One really neat thing about using Puppet, you can actually use Puppet to manage Puppet. So you can have Puppet manage the Puppet agent package and just be able to use Hira to have an input version so that you can do a phased rollout over time so that you can control the updates and test them out first.
Okay. Thanks, Carl. Will Cumulus Linux HCL support network switch vendor enhancements such as Acton's EdgeCore 4654T that has 2 operation module slots in the back supporting additional 240 gig ports?
That's a great question. We haven't seen much demand for that specifically, but if you contact a Cumulus salesperson and let them know your request, we can make sure to investigate to add that support. I believe our sales team is very responsive.
Great. And we're upgrading the Cumulus OS on a switch. Does the switch need to be rebooted?
The answer to that is really that depends. There are 2 ways to upgrade the switch, and also so if you use a binary image, the switch will need to be rebooted when you upgrade to a new binary image. If you use apt-get upgrade to upgrade within a release, it usually does because any kernel updates require a reboot of the switch, but it does not always, similar to how servers work. Like some packages require, kernel packages require reboots. Some packages, such as a Quagga update, may only require a restart of Quagga. Or a Puppet update would also, only require a restart of Puppet.
Okay. How do I separate mission responsibilities between network and compute, but still promote collaboration between teams?
That's a great question. We definitely recommend having a module per team. So for example, the network team can have a module that they manage and maintain, and they only have commit rights to. But any team can issue a pull request against that. So the rest of the company needs to be able to have read access to that core module. And that way, the compute team can still collaborate with the networking team on the different configurations and routes that they're going to need to be able to serve their business applications on the compute side, but have a gate so that the network team can protect their expertise and apply that as part of the collaboration with the rest of the teams. And then, of course, on the vice versa, so the network team can promote changes and suggest changes to the code on the compute side, but only the compute teams will be able to have write access to accept them.
Okay. Do we have a native Puppet client for Cumulus Linux? Will it be installed by an apt-get command or needs to be copied to user space and executed?
Yes, Puppet Labs did a great job in ensuring compatibility of their clients with Cumulus Linux. And an apt-get install will install Puppet with no problem, just like on a server.
Okay. We're almost running out of time now, and I think we've had a great webinar today. And thank you, everybody, for making it super interactive. To get some feedback from everybody who has attended the webinar through the follow-up emails. Hope that you found useful, and please do tune in to our next webinar, which is on September 30th, SDDC with Cumulus Linux, and the presenters would be David Sin and Nishan Satyanarayan. The details are available on our website at cumulusnetwork.com/webinar. Thank you all for your time today and joining us.